Ladies and gentlemen, so this is the very last event, I think, of 10 that you've had. I remember many, many years ago, when I was a teenager, there was a film on the television which my father liked. It was called Shenandoah, and I made some very sarcastic remarks about the American Civil War, about some particular fellow who was there, and I said, "Oh, your man, he's going to come back in a coffin as well as the others." And my father snapped at me and he said, "You know, when you can do something as well as this film has done, then you can criticize it." Now, you've had a chance to listen to 10 events, including 7 lectures, and you're entitled to say to each other and in your own mind, I could do better than that or as well as that. But that's the challenge, and I'm sure you're going to rise to it. So today, we have a friend of mine, Patrick Marrinan, who has been a friend for a long time, and who's also one of the best advocates of the last 40 years. That is the God honest truth. I know that because he worked for me in the tribunal over in Dublin Castle, and he also is an author, and he is a great guy. And Anna is going to interview about his book, one of 2 detective books that he wrote, and which were published, not in this country, but in England, because they're so good. So, over to you.
Okay, so this is the book we're talking about today, Degrees of Guilt by Mr. Patrick Marrinan. So Blair Armstrong SC investigates the case of a Russian immigrant who may or may not have murdered his mother while sleepwalking. So Pat, where did the idea for this book come from?
It was a murder that had occurred in Sandymount, smack in the middle of middle-class Dublin.
Yeah, Sandymount isn't really a murder hub, is it?
No, it isn't, and you see it features in the book. But anyway, for that reason, it's because you know you don't expect murders to occur next door.
No.
But anyway, it was an Eastern European young lady who was having trouble with her boyfriend, who had beaten her very badly, and she left the flat where she was staying. She went into town and she met some others, and she told them what had happened, and they said they'd go and teach him a lesson. And the accused was, who I represented, was Ukrainian, and he had gone back to the flat, and to cut a long story short, they drank too much, they took too many drugs, they didn't like the person that they were there to reprimand, the boyfriend, because he was from Kazakhstan, and so they beat him to death and then disposed of his body by putting it in a suitcase and bringing it north side.
And did they admit to it?
No, this is the interesting thing, is that when the case has been investigated and I was briefed, the accused was charged with murder, and I went to see him in prison, and he was protesting vehemently that the confession that was set out in the statement in the Book of Evidence weren't in his words.
Okay.
And they had used an interpreter, and we asked to what was the qualifications of the interpreter. Was she somebody who was well versed in English and Ukrainian? It turned out she was Russian. And to cut a long story short, we ended up by bringing a High Court bail application and asked the prosecution, it was quite a clever move actually, if they would have the same interpreter, because in those days you didn't have the interviews weren't videotaped as they are now.
Really?
Yeah, no, it was pre that.
Gosh.
So we invited the prosecution we asked the prosecution to have the same interpreter translated the bail application. And it turned out we brought a professor of English, of Russian from Trinity College to oversee the interpretation as he heard it unfold, and it was absolutely shocking. The interpreter got less than 50% of the wording correct, and it was absolutely shocking when we saw the report. And so, you know, it was something that you don't expect to happen.
No.
You know, you expect the cogs of justice to run smoothly. And here we were in a situation where they hadn't, because of something that perhaps nobody would even give a second thought to. A qualification of an interpreter employed by an agency that hadn't been looked into. So nobody had gone to this agency and said, well, look, this is the standard that we want.
Yeah.
So anyway, sorry for being so long-winded, but I put the two cases together.
Yeah. Yeah.
And just jumbled them up.
Yeah.
And the other book that I wrote in or around about the same time as this, in fact, that was the first book I wrote, Degrees of Guilt.
Mm-hmm.
The second one I wrote was after my wife had very pointedly and rather cruelly given me a writing course, put me on a writing course as a birthday present, and that was after I'd written Degrees of Guilt. I found that absolutely brilliant, going on a writing course.
Which one was it? Which writing?
Orna Ross,
Okay.
Orna McCarthy, fabulous novelist, historical novelist really,
Yeah.
but fabulous. And she had a great writing course. I found that very educational. But anyway, so I came to write Degrees of Guilt. It got nowhere with it, and then I wrote Scapegoat as the second one, which was a lot easier to write once I'd done the writing course.
Yeah.
But what was interesting about this, and it was you sent me a couple of questions you were going to ask, and the one that you didn't really ask is why? Why a relatively successful barrister would decide mid-career, because this is 14, 15 years ago, I was in my early 50s, late mid-50s. And why in heaven's name would all of a sudden you step outside your comfort zone? You know, I mean, I had written poetry when I was young, but it was very private.
Yeah.
The poetry that I wrote was for myself, and it was during my romantic period, if I can put it that way. But no, I didn't share that with anybody because that can be quite soulful. And I didn't feel confident in sharing it with anybody. And then I had, my greatest love was art. Yeah. And I was a handy artist and have won many competitions in Ireland for my art. And that was a very comfortable place to be because you could produce something and people were saying, you know, that's good, I like that. And that's great. That's a natural talent that you either have or you haven't got. Yeah. Very difficult to learn or to develop. But that was just something that I had and I was lucky to have it. I had to work very hard on being a barrister. Yeah. I had to work hard on studying. I didn't enjoy it. I wasn't academic. I went to Trinity and failed criminal law. Miserably, but got a first in evidence, which was important to me at the time. It was the one thing that I was really interested in because it was logical, and I loved the whole concept of a logical train of thought. But so I had to work hard at being in court. I was quite shy by nature. I didn't like public speaking. I was not a debater. If somebody had asked me to debate in school, I'd have run a million miles.
Really?
Yes, and didn't enjoy it. Was desperately nervous. The first times, the first occasions that I went to court and conducted cases was absolutely useless.
And how did you get through it?
Well, I didn't really. The reality of it, despite what your father says, I don't accept a lot of what he's saying. But I was always waiting to be found out, you know, throughout my career.
Imposter syndrome.
But I hated what I hated more than anything else was putting pen to paper. Oh, I couldn't write an opinion. I couldn't draft. I hated it. If somebody wanted an opinion, I give it there and then on the spot to them, to their face. Asked me to write it down and send it off. No, I hated it. I just didn't have any sort of natural talent for writing or for developing arguments. What I was good at was I was good with people. I was good in I was good interacting with people, with ordinary people, with criminals. Maybe they thought the way I did, I don't know, but I had empathy. It was the greatest gift that I had.
Yeah.
I had natural empathy for people. And when you see where somebody else is and their predicament in a real and meaningful way, well, then you can advocate from their standpoint. So anyway, just to come back to the writing, you know, it was sheer madness on my part to step outside my comfort zone. I have no idea why all of a sudden I decided to do it, but it was sheer madness, because when I look back on it, I have no experience. I have never read a crime thriller, or I mean, I just didn't enjoy novels. Even historical novels I didn't enjoy. I read a lot of biographies, and I was very interested in science and cosmology and other areas. Mathematics I was very interested in. But I just, to read a crime novel or John Grisham or something would be my worst nightmare, you know. I just didn't do it.
You never read like Agatha Christie or anything like that?
No, I
watch
wouldn't. No. I just was not interested in murder mystery. So anyway, I had originally started to do it on the basis that I would write a comedy. So it was originally to be a comedy. As you will see if you've read the book, you'll see it's very much tongue-in-cheek.
Yeah.
You know, and it's.
Well, there's a lot of lightness in there.
Yeah, well, there was to be an awful lot more. I mean,
Yeah.
it was to be a comedy, and I wrote for a strange reason, because first of all, I wrote under a non-diploma in the first instance.
Oh, like a pseudonym.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
So that was the first thing, and the second thing is that Degrees of Guilt was based in London.
Yes.
And
Originally the draft.
yes.
Yeah. Okay.
So you can, if you've read it, you will actually see that some of the dialogue is more English than it is Irish.
Yeah.
Because I went over to London, I researched it, I went to the Old Bailey, because I didn't want it to be parochial. I didn't want it to be about the law library in Dublin, and I wanted it to be outside all that.
Yeah.
So anyway, so I did all my research, and then when I eventually got an agent, and I looked at your video with Brian Cregan, which was absolutely delightful.
Oh yeah, talking about Parnell. Yeah.
And what a delightful man he is, but absolutely delightful. But the story he told about meeting his agent was absolutely fantastic. But anyway,
Well, there's notoriously slippery people, agents of all sorts, aren't there? Some of them are great, but
yeah. Well, I was lucky. Mine ended up. My agent was Russian, so I was very lucky.
Oh my God, that's so fitting.
Yeah, I wrote to Author Rights Agency, and Svetlana Pronko, it was her company, and I didn't know that she was Russian when I sent it off to her, but of course then she had an interest in it, and it just sparked something, so she had an interest in it. I think otherwise she'd have rejected it. And but she said to me, look, you know, first of all, she said, people are more likely to read a book if they think it's in some way authentic, so you have to say who you are, because otherwise, you know, it's going to carry some weight with publishers.
Yeah.
And second of all, why in heaven's name have you based it in London? Because you know, all the crime thrillers, all the fad at the time was everything's based in Ireland. And the international audience wanted to listen to Irish stories. So anyway, I ended up having to rewrite it on her recommendation, and it was a good recommendation. But so stepping outside your comfort zone, going into an area where you just really don't know what you're doing.
And you say you hated putting pen to paper, writing legal opinions and that. How did you get through writing a whole novel?
It just came very easily. I just sat down, and it was desperately easy. It was sort of free writing.
Yeah.
It wasn't structured, and I just enjoyed it. It was hypnotic. I found it a great relief from the stresses and strains of practice. It was wonderful because I had the opportunity to win a few cases. And second of all, you know, I could ask questions during the course of a trial and get the right answers for once. And so from that point of view, you had that poetic license with everything. So it was really enjoyable doing that. You know, but then when I had done it, and Scapegoat was the first one to be published, and then this followed on very quickly afterwards. Both of them not as they are now, both of them much longer. They were sliced to bits by the London publisher, but that didn't matter. I didn't mind. I mean, you can't be precious. That's the one thing, you can't be precious.
Well, I've heard a phrase in writing is kill your darlings. So whatever passages you think are really good and really great prose writing, they sort of put to the cut, unfortunately, half the time. Yeah,
I was actually just, it's interesting that you asked me to do this because I sort of come to that stage in my life where I'm contemplating hanging up the old wig and gown and packing it in, and was thinking of different things that I could do. My greatest regret with these, because they're two very mediocre books, and that's been frank about it, but I wish I had devoted more time and energy to them, and perhaps either have written them, both of them, as comedies, or alternatively have written them in a serious way and developed characters and all the rest. Which I didn't do. So you made me think, because I actually looked up my old draft from Sleepwalker that I had at home. And I looked at some chapters that are there where I thought that, you know, it was so descriptive. It was sort of John Banville, eat your heart out. This is great. And I remember they were included in the draft that went to the publisher. And one of them, chapter 42, which was based in Venice, and I thought it was just brilliant. You know, I really did. And it came back saying that this is fine, blah, 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 but chapter 42 has no place in a book like this. So that was it. So I was saying, you can't be precious about these things. You've got to, you've got to take it on the chin when people are critical of you. But very, very enjoyable, I must say. And when you contacted me to do this, I thought, oh, no, I'm not going to be good at it. I'm not good at talking about these sort of things. But I'm so glad you did, because it forced me then to look back over some of the notes that I've made, some of the thoughts that I jotted down on paper. And it brought back memories of how much I did enjoy it when I was doing it, you know. I wasn't one of these people who got up at 8 o'clock in the morning and ran the midnight oil. You know, I do as long as I felt comfortable doing it. It might be just an hour, it might be 3 hours maximum. But anyway, so that's it. I'm asking the questions. You're supposed to I'm answering my own questions.
No, you're a really good talker. I find it so interesting to say. I mean, there's so much there, but what's interesting to me is that you said you were not a public speaker. You sort of view yourself. Do you view yourself as like a more of a creative person or more of a legal mind? Because I know you come from a legal family, don't you?
No, I do. But well, that hasn't really anything to do with it. My grandfather was a lawyer, my father was a lawyer, but my grandfather was also a senior member of the Royal Irish Constabulary in Northern Ireland. You know, it doesn't mean I'd make a good policeman.
No.
Maybe I would. I
Maybe
don't
you
know.
would.
So you know, as I say, I've always been. I waited all my career to be found out, right? Because I don't think that I am that talented. But what I do have, and I recognise, is that I have the ability, and it's quite interesting because one of the strengths of the book, or perhaps the only strength of the book, was identified by a reader in Putnam's in the United States, who rejected my book, and that would have been a big thing had they accepted it, but they had the courtesy to come back with a reason for the rejection, which most publishers don't. They just ignore you. But they came back and they said that they thought that the courtroom scenes were exceptional.
Yeah.
And would I consider writing a novel based entirely in the courtroom? So that was an interesting idea, and it's something that I might revisit.
Yeah.
But what I did have was I had the ability to be able to ask questions of witnesses.
Yeah.
And to be able to paint a picture through questioning, and a picture that I wanted, as opposed to the picture that the witness wanted to paint, which was very important, because that allowed me then to control the case, the trial, and how it went. So I had that ability, but it was one of the, and also I was reasonably good with juries, because I could just.
And where does that ability come from? Does it come from, you mentioned you had a really good capacity for empathy?
I think it is. I think a lot of it is empathy. I mean,
Yeah.
if you understand your opponent,
Yeah.
you get an idea where the weaknesses might be, and where the strengths are. But I think that it's very important. If you're an advocate, first of all, honesty is very important.
Yeah,
and,
yeah.
Your father, the wonderful Supreme Court judge, is sitting down there, and we shared on a train. I was in the middle of the draft of Sleepwalker, and he was in the middle of his draft of Lies in the Mirror, which is a wonderful, wonderful book. So we have a mutual admiration society. That's the reason I'm really here. I wrote a wonderful review of his book for the Bar Review, and he did one on Amazon for me. So but we shared a train journey to Castlebar, and during the course of the tribunal we were both engaged in. And he brought his draft and I brought mine, and we swapped ideas and we read and were critical of each other's work. Your father wanted more passion in my book, which I understood. He also wanted more sex in it, which I didn't understand. But anyway, but it was constructive criticisms were the order of the day. But I've lost my train of thought now. I was talking about the ability to be able to understand.
Yeah, and the strength of being able to empathise.
Yeah. It's not just that's true of everything. It applies to everything in life. You keep friends because you understand them.
Yeah.
And I'm surrounded by the same friends that I had when I was 7 or 8 years of age, and they haven't gone anywhere, and they're lifelong. But that's because you understand that we all have little idiosyncrasies, those things that annoy us about other people and irritate us and all the rest. But if you're not looking at it from your point of view all the time, you actually understand their point of view. Well, then you're going to be much more tolerant. But sorry, the point that I was making when I got distracted was that your father wrote this fantastic book, Lies in the Mirror, and it is so relevant to today, to what's happening in the United States of America, and the erosion of democracy, the growth of fake news, and the total inability to be able to identify where the truth actually lies, and what grows out of that. And your father made a very strong case that evil grows out of it, and I think we're beginning to see that, not just in the United States of America, we're seeing it in the United Kingdom unfolding before our eyes, where lie after lie is empowering some people, but it has the capacity to disenfranchise people as well. But so when people see that you're honest, they tend to trust you.
Yeah.
And I was always honest as an advocate, always honest, never dishonest, either with the court. I was always very, very frank and very straight with the court. And therefore I got a good reputation amongst judges. And that was very important because that means that you haven't got your eye on that particular problem area.
Yes.
You know, you're not going to be hounded by a judge who respects you.
Yeah. And it gives you the ability that you said you had to kind of make the court see the case the way you wanted them to see it.
Yeah, but that's a different thing. But but that's slightly different thing because you've got to have some sort of sleight of hand engaged there as well.
Yeah.
But you utilize it. You do it in a very honest. So I've been very fortunate. I've had generally. I can never remember in a very long career. I mean. I've been going since I was 21. I qualified. I was in practice in Belfast during the 70s, at the height of the Troubles in Northern Ireland, representing some very hard men and women, and some not so hard men and women as well. But I can never remember any client being discourteous to me, any client being rude, I just found that I never had a conflict situation.
Yeah.
Other than the fellow that leapt up and punched me in the nose, which you might have read about, or didn't read about, I don't know, in court. But that was the only time that I had, and I was prosecuting. Oh no, it was all over the newspapers. But anyway, and a fellow charged with murder, and. But that was the only incident. Thanks be to God. But anyway, I was prosecuting him, so I wasn't my client.
Clearly, you're doing a good job if you annoyed him enough to have him punch you in the face.
No, it can be pretty annoying,
Yeah.
as you're finding out.
No.
So, but anyway, these things happen in life, and.
Is addiction and abusing substances, is that something that you saw a lot of? Is that very, very common?
Yes, it just totally dominated my career as a criminal advocate. It was in every case that I either prosecuted or defended.
Because it's in this book as well.
In some shape or another, where it doesn't intrude. You see that there's two types of criminals really, in my view. There's the evil criminal who sits down and works out how they're going to commit a crime and does so over a long period of time. It'll be the child abuser who's worked out and made decisions and created an environment that's very carefully thought out. There's the fraudster who operates a scheme of things to be able to take money from little old ladies or whoever it happens to be. There's that type of criminal, and then there's the criminal who acts on the spur of the moment. Generally they do so because they've made a bad judgment. And generally the bad judgment is because they've been intoxicated or acted under the influence of drugs. That has been my experience. Now, a lot of professional criminals are obviously in an entirely different situation, gangland, crime, and that's an entirely different scenario. Very unattractive from an advocate's point of view to be engaged in any of those cases. And I have tended to avoid them all if I can, but it's very difficult because we operate the taxi rank principle, which means that you're the next available cabbie to do the case, and if you are, you're obliged to take it on. You can't actually refuse to take a case under the rules of our profession unless you're busy. But fortunately, whatever it was, I was off doing another fare somewhere else, and was very careful not to come back into the taxi rank unless I knew that the next case coming wasn't a gangland type of crime. I've done a few of them.
Yes.
And I didn't enjoy them.
Yeah. I can imagine. So 2 questions about the book itself. First one is, are you going to write a third novel? And the second one is, would you consider adapting this for TV? Because I think it would make a great TV series. Do you watch any crime TV series at the moment? Because there's tons of them.
during the lockdown, I mean,
Yeah.
I discovered Netflix and enjoyed almost everything that I saw. You know, I mean, that's absolutely some fantastic stuff. It's a fantastic storytelling. I mean, that's what it's about at the end of the day. I mean, people write for different reasons, but it's just a matter of telling a yarn, a story, you know, and whether it's a long story or a short story, it doesn't really matter. It's the ability to be able to tell a story from beginning to end, and people don't get too wrapped up in the style of what's written. They don't get lost in the book. I mean, sometimes, this isn't a criticism, because I've never criticized fellow writers, if I can call them that. I've never once criticized. I mean, if I enjoy their writing, I enjoy it. If I don't, well, that's fine. That's their way of doing it. But sometimes, if I have to go back and read a paragraph to get an understanding of what the author has just said, well, then that's bad. I'll put the book away. I won't continue it. Mm-hmm. If you've read 100 pages and you haven't had to do that, regardless of the fact that it mightn't be particularly descriptive, maybe the dialogue is jarring a little bit, but you're just getting away with it. But if you've got to 100 pages and you're still there and you're wondering what's happened next, well, then I think the author has been successful in what he or she has set out to achieve.
Well, I think the real strength of this is it's a real page turner. I said that to you, and you said a couple of times that you thought it was mediocre. I would like to strongly disagree with that.
What's the bottom line here? Straight to the end, yeah.
No, really,
it's
really good, because there's a lot of stuff out there that's quite bloated. You know, like there's a lot of. We were talking very briefly before you got here about the Staircase, which is a Netflix series about true crime.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
And there's so many extra episodes, and I think that there's a lot in there that could have been cut. And I think the good thing about this is it's very streamlined. So
yeah, well, they should never. John Hale, who I dealt with Hale Books in London, was very, very good, and you know, the advice he gave me, certainly as far as a crime novel is concerned, is that there should be nothing in the book that doesn't support the story in some sense.
Yeah.
Now, for example, Michael Connelly was a fantastic writer and hugely successful, obviously, absolutely brilliant. But he will describe people sitting down to dinner, and a group of 7 or 8 people, and he will tell you what was on the menu, what they ordered, what the wine was, what they had for starters, what they had for main course, and what they had for dessert. Now, I couldn't stick with that, but there are people readers who can't live with that. They want that, and they want to be inside the book, as it were. So, you know, there are horses for horses. Some people. You know, but it's just such a subjective thing at the end of the day, isn't it?
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
so you don't know who you're appealing to. There was an author that our American friends might know, and I'm just trying to think his name now. Robert Waller, and he wrote what is the 4th most successful novel of all times, and I bet you don't even know what it is.
No, I have no idea.
And how you could think this is up there with The Alchemist by Paulo Coelho, which was a huge international success. Dan Brown's The Da Vinci Code up there, a massive success. Ernest Hemingway's The Old Man and the Sea, fantastic success, and you know, over a long period of time. The Bridges of Madison County.
Oh, The Bridges of, yeah, okay.
Which he wrote in 2 weeks.
Wow.
And it's a love story, and it's a novella, and it's, I think, maybe 120 pages maximum in big print and widely spaced lines. And when it was published, the reviewers said it was nonsense, and it was just a story about a photographer who's taking pictures in Madison County of the bridges, which are the covered bridges, and a war bride, Francesco. Her husband she's married, she's an Italian war bride. She'd married an American soldier, and he had gone to market with the family, and she was at home looking after the house, and she met this photographer who was there taking photographs, and they fell in love, and they had 4 days of romance, and she made a decision that she would stay with her family and her children. But this struck a chord with the American audience, and it, despite the fact that it was sort of put down as a Mills and Boon novel, it was savaged in all the reviews, but it just, people started buying the book and buying the book. And as I say, it went to, I think it was the fourth, it ended up selling somewhere in the region of 100 million copies. And then was made into a wonderful film, which if you haven't seen, you really do need to see, with Clint Eastwood in one of his really good acting roles. And
well, novellas generally translate very well to feature film, and novels translate to TV series. So
oh yes, so the question you asked me,
yeah,
that has been explored.
Do it.
So no, well, that's been explored. Yeah, but not recently. And you know, things become popular for a period of time. When I wrote this courtroom dramas, crime drama, they weren't popular.
No.
And probably still not popular, the courtroom drama. So, you know, will it come back? I don't know. We had the Verdict, which was really the last really good one, with Paul Newman. Will it come back? I don't know, is the answer. But certainly there were a couple of people interested in it. Pierce Brosnan was interested in
oh yeah, he'd be great.
buying the rights to it. Well, he wouldn't have to buy them, I give him. Just simply forget it. But anyway, look, you know, but that's all in the past, and now you're bringing it all up. You know, then I start getting excited. I start thinking, well, maybe that's a project. Maybe that's.
I think it is. I think it would be a great project.
Yeah, yeah.
Honest, would you write another novel?
Probably not.
No.
Your dad gave me a very good book on screenwriting that he might have borrowed from your mum.
Probably, yes.
And I read that, and it was very, very good. And I like the idea of screenwriting more than I like the idea of writing.
Well, I think you have such a unique perspective, having done an actual full successful career as a lawyer, to actually write a really good crime TV series, a series based on this. So I think you should do that, and I think you should take my advice.
I will.
Catch you on Netflix in what, 2 years?
I will take your advice, and I will explore that.
Yeah.
When I do it, I don't know.
Great, cool.
But I will definitely do it. Yeah.
Yeah. Does anybody have any questions? I feel like I haven't even asked any questions. You're such a compelling speaker. It's just been great to listen.
No, well, it's a good audience.
Has it changed being a writer versus being a barrister? Did it change your view of the justice system, how it works? You look at it and think, from instead of being, in the centre of the action, kind of outside looking in, do you think it changed your view on how it operates, or do you think it should operate better, sort of thing?
Well, I think the answer to that is that I've always looked at it from the inside, so it's very difficult to know. I'm a traditionalist. I have a huge amount of respect for judges, for the independence of our judiciary, their role and function, and I have no criticism to make of that. There's some criticism in relation to judicial appointments and how they have been done in the past, but I don't believe we've ever produced bad judges. I think that even though the system mightn't be great, it produced really good judges. They're truly independent, something that we value enormously when you see what's happening elsewhere, where you see judgments going down on political lines. So that system works. The jury system is absolutely superb. It works exceptionally well. our system that we have in this country of cases being prosecuted and defended by barristers who both is very important, because it allows you to see both sides, and there are very few barristers who only defend, and I don't think it's by choice. I think that sometimes they might have been out of favour with the Director of Public Prosecutions, but my preference would be to see everybody who defends also prosecute, because then you get a different insight, and it makes you more respectful of people like victims when they come to give evidence in court, particularly victims in rape cases and sexual assault cases. When you're prosecuting, you have to be able to relate, and you have to understand their perspective. You have to sit down and meet with them and talk to them. You never talk about the case itself, because you're barred from doing that in case your conversation might influence their evidence when they come to give evidence. But what you do is you certainly learn to put them at their ease and give them the confidence that they're coming into an environment that they can feel as comfortable as they can, and secondly, that they know that somebody reasonably competent is there to present and argue the case. So that's very important, and when you see that up front and you see a victim, when you come to defend a similar type case, you perhaps have a better understanding of what that person is going through, and it means that you tend to avoid perhaps some primitive behaviour that you might otherwise be engaged in dealing with the witness. So that system works very well. Our common law system on the civil side is absolutely first rate, and we have juries where they're needed, and we don't have them now where they're not needed. So I think I'm from the inside, certainly, I think that the system works very well. We need to educate the public a little bit better. My sister, Pauline Marrinan Quinn, wrote an exceptionally good children's book called What's Law, Moo, which is a huge success, and she's done a few podcasts and radio presentations on teaching young children what we used to be taught in school. We used to call it civics, but she's broadened it now to include the operation of the law and the whole system of justice in the country. I think it's in good shape. I really do. I think it's excellent shape, particularly when you see what unfolds elsewhere.
And thank you very much for such an open and honest conversation. But I noted that at the beginning of the talk that you said that you like to push yourself out of your comfort zone a bit, and I suppose that also in the fact equates to the fact that you talked a lot about having empathy for, I suppose, the other side. And I'm just wondering, what is your key, I suppose, driving motivational factor for pushing yourself so out of your comfort zone?
Yeah, that's a really good question, and I don't think I have an answer for it, because, you know, I thought, you know, if you're reasonably good at something and you've got a reasonably good, successful career, you know, you think you just sit back and rest on your laurels and enjoy it. And I mean, it could be quite lazy, you know. I like putting my feet up. I like a glass of brandy and a cigar and to do nothing, like anybody else. I'm not sure why. When I started doing it, it was just just an interest, and then I started engaging with my two daughters and also my wife, and drove them mad over dinner, telling them how the next chapter was going to go in my book, and they were wonderful because they listened. You know, I don't think any of it sank in, but they listened and they nodded, yes, sure, Dad, that's fine, Dad, and all the rest. But as I went along, I had that audience, and that was good. Whether I could have done it totally alone, I'm not so sure, because I didn't share it with anybody else. So why outside your comfort zone? To come back to the question, I suppose because, you know, excitement. There was a lot of excitement involved. Engaging with the publishing world was a bad experience. Very arrogant people, very self-opinionated people. I thought lawyers were bad, but my God. You know, and no kindness, no respect, no courtesy. That was really outside my comfort zone, because that's what I was engaged with every day with my colleagues and with people that I was dealing with. Being treated really like a piece of dirt on occasions. It's just astonishing. And no buffer zone there, nobody to, you have an agent that you can go and cry on her shoulder or whatever. But there weren't any tears on my part, because when you meet people like that and you become involved and you see it for what it is, and you say, well look, I actually don't want to have anything to do with that. Look, you have my bloody book. If you want to publish it, you can publish it, and that's fine. I'm not interested in all this nonsense. So you can step back from it. Not being dependent either emotionally, because it didn't matter to me whether my book got published or not. I mean, I remember when, because that's bad enough, but the other one, it's even worse. As far as I was concerned, I'd be my greatest critic. But when I found out it was going to be published, the champagne was opened and drunk. And then all of a sudden I realized, my God, people are going to read this nonsense. And, you know, and people automatically assume, you know, they think that it's a bit of you in there when there's nothing of you in there. You know, it's other people that obviously characters that you've met along the way. And you sort of all of a sudden people think you're bearing your soul. I'm not bearing my soul. I have no message. I'm not in a position to give a message to anybody. So from that point of view, I was dreading then when and then when actually it came back in the printed form, and I looked, I thought, oh no, what have I done? Can I call the whole thing off? You know, that wasn't part of the plan, because you get so immersed in it. The plan was Charlie Farley BL was the name of was the author, and it was based in London. And all of a sudden it's Patrick Marrinan Senior Counsel, and it's based in Dublin. And all of a sudden I woke up and realised I'm going to have to go into the law library. Stand over this nonsense. But so in a way that sort of saddened me in a way, because I also wanted it to be a comedy, and that was taken out of it. And there's a lovely author, if you've got a chance, from the 40s and 50s, Henry Cecil, who was a county court judge, but he wrote some fantastic courtroom dramas, is too strong a word for them, but they're comedies, and they are absolutely Settled Out of Court is one, and they are absolutely hilarious. So I would like to write comedy, but that's very difficult as well.
I think you've more than got capability to do that.
I don't know about that, but I'll pursue the do you know anybody who might
Lots of people. I'll put you in touch with.
So anybody who can sell the rights can get 50% commission. So that's an open invitation.
That's our challenge. Thank you so much, Pat.